Hello. Um, Today I'm gonna be talking about the communication theory that I chose from our textbook that we haven't covered, which is called Dramatism, and this was developed by a man named Kenneth Berg. So to start off, most people think of communication as just sending a message from point A to B, but Berg looked at this actually a little bit differently. He believed that language is a form of action. And he famously said that life isn't just like a drama, it is essentially a drama. And every time we speak, we are actually performing, and we are doing so because we have a specific motive. We aren't just talking, we are trying to get people to see the world and our actions in a certain way. So, in this presentation, I'm gonna break down the two biggest parts of this theory. The first of is the pentad, which kind of helps us to understand these motives that Kenneth is talking about, and the cycle of guilt, which explains why we feel the need to talk our way out of trouble. So after that, I will show you how I use this theory in my own studies as an international relations major, especially when looking at peace sharing in Africa. I did a paper on Burundi and South Sudan in peace agreements, comparing these peace agreements to each other and seeing the differences. Then I will discuss an academic study that uses dramatism to explain how we argue about history and statues. And finally, I'll just wrap up with what this means to our daily lives as humans. So by the end of this video, I hope to show you that our words are actually strategic tools that we use to navigate the drama of life. So the basics, I can start with the basics. So the core of dramatism is something called the dramatic pentad, and Berg explains this as if like if you want to understand why someone said something, you have to look at these five things. The first one is the act itself, so what was done. The second one is the scene, where and when did it happen? What was the context of this act before this? The third one is the agent, who did this act? And the fourth one is the agency. How did they do this act? Like what tools or methods did they use? The agent used. And the last one is the purpose. Why did they do it? Like what was their goal? What was their motive behind this? So the pendat is a way to see how people spin a story. For example, if politician is caught in a scandal, they might tend to focus heavily on the scene. They can explain this by this was a stressful environment, or they can say these were the things, the way the things were back in the day, to kind of take the attention from off of themselves. So by changing which of these five things we emphasize, we can actually change the whole meaning of the story. We can narrate it to our own words, or to our own needs and goals. And the second big idea is the cycle of guilt. Berg believed that we as humans are constantly feeling kind of a sense of guilt. And he doesn't just mean like this guilt as I did something wrong guilt. He means like any kind of tension, any kind of anxiety or feeling that things aren't right. And he says we use communication to get rid of this tension. And there are two main ways to do this. One of them is the first one is the mortification. This is when we take the blame ourselves. We apologize and admit that we were at the wrong, and we kind of ask for forgiveness. This is the more positive way. The second way is victimage or scapegoating someone. This is when we kind of like point a finger at someone, and we kind of identify an external villain and blame them for our problems, so we can kind of feel better, or we can make other people not see us bad people. And once we purge this guilt, we kind of, he says that we reach a state of redemption, which is just kind of a temporary feeling of peace until this cycle just starts all over again in any kind of problem. Um, So this part of the theory, when I checked it from the textbook, it really clicked for me because of my background in international relations, as I mentioned before, of my major. Last semester, I worked on a paper about peace sharing agreements and institutional absorption, specifically looking at lessons from the cases of Burundi and South Sudan. So what I noticed that when you look at this kind of high stakes conflicts and through the lens of dramatism, you see that peace treaties are basically scripts in a giant drama that Kenneth is actually talking about. For example, in Burundi, when there was a government and there was a rebel groups and they had a way of sitting down and talk, and they were gonna essentially they were gonna make an institution and a peace agreement that they were gonna continue for the next generations. But they weren't actually just discussing laws; they were kind of fighting over the pentad, this diagram that we kind of just talked about. So how to explain this is, let's say one group will describe a violent event as a necessary act. They say that had to do this ethnic cleansing because for a necessary act as a survival, and this was forced by a dangerous scene, which was the ethnic tension. And the other group, the group that is against this, will describe it as a criminal act of international law, and this was a criminal act by an evil agent. The agent was an evil person here. And my research showed me that for peace to work, both sides have to kind of find a way to share the same drama, and they have to agree on a new purpose for the country. And if they can't agree on the script, the piece fails because they're still stuck in the victimage stage, which is constantly blaming each other as scapegoats instead of moving toward redemption. The redemption being here is the building a healthy institution for the country, for the nation to actually obtain peace. And on a more personal level, I have realized I do this too myself. Whenever might be like when I'm stressed about future, my future or my career, for example, I'm gonna be graduating by the end of the semester, and I'm trying to find an internship for myself. I kind of tend to look for a scapegoat. Let's say this can be the job market or the economy or me being an international student, and this is being harder for me to find a job. And kind of instead of just looking at my own actions as an agent, I kind of just rely on these external factors that can make the problem for me. And this theory has also taught me that I can choose how I frame my own story. So like, am I a victim of the scene or am I an agent? Like, and who can change the act, basically, essentially. And to show how this works in real world, I found a study from Jeff Gaffey, and his theory is called the evolution of memory, dramatism, and the rhetoric of the past. In this study, Gaffey wanted to understand the heated debates we see today. It could be about between politicians, about it could be about history, about certain genocides, and he used Berkey's pentad to analyze the speeches of people who wanted to keep statues up versus those who wanted them taken down. And what the study found was that Gaffey discovered that people who wanted to keep the statues almost always focused on the scene. They argued that statues were part of our history, part of the landscape, and by making it about the scene, they essentially made the statues seem like an unchangeable part of the background that we just have to accept. On the other hand, people who wanted to remove the statues focused on the agent part of the pentad. They talked about the specific person the statue represented. It could be their laws, their crimes, their character. And by making it about the agent, they essentially make the statue seem like a choice we are making today to honor someone bad. And I think that this study was a perfect example of dramatism. It showed that we aren't just arguing about piece of story, a piece of a stone. We are actually arguing about which part of the pentad is more important. And it proves that how we frame history changes how we feel about justice today. And to wrap everything up, dramatism teaches us, I think, in a way that our words are never just like words. They are kind of like a tools that we use to manage our guilt and justify our actions, and also influence how others see us. So I, after this analyzing the pentad and the cycle of guilt, I saw how this also applied to a massive like international conflicts in places like the study I made, or in any place in the world that this might happen. And I also saw that this shapes the way we argue about the historical statues. And I guess the biggest takeaway for me is that the next time I'm in a conflict or listening to a speech, I would be asking myself, like, which part of the pentad are they trying to make me look at? And if I can see the drama, I can essentially understand their motive based on this. Um, and this was it. Thank you so much for this semester, and I hope that everything goes well.